Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Northborough Southborough Regional School Committee open meeting of Wednesday, January 18th, 2023, and it is 6:32. First on the agenda is public comment. No public comment for this evening yet. So we move to action on the minutes. The first would be our open meeting discussion of January 21st, 2022. Any comments on those minutes? Nope, we need a motion to accept those.
I make a motion to approve and release the open meeting minutes of December 21st, 2022.
Second. And that's the open meeting. Okay, first, Chris, and second, Karen. All in favor? Those pass unanimously. And then we have the executive session minutes of December 21st. That would be a vote and retain.
I make a motion that we approve but retain the executive session minutes of December 21st, 2022.
Seconded.
First, Chris, and second, Matthew. All in favor of that one? That's unanimous. That passes. That brings us, there's no educational policy at this time to bring forward, so we have new business. Turn that over to the superintendent.
Sure. So legislative update. So I believe at the January meeting, I did share with the committee that the OSD increase of 14% to out-of-district special education tuition is set, and that will not change. So our advocacy will shift to our legislative delegation in advocating for an increase in circuit breaker. So we do have a draft letter that we plan on having the chair sign, and we will send that off on behalf of the regional school committee. Also, just in terms of legislative update, with the changing of the governor does have additional time to submit her budget. So that is anticipated to be released at the end of February, which does impact our budget process because we do not have all of the data that we typically would have at the end of January. So a lot of the budget projections that we'll be moving forward with are based on FY23 information. And as the state provides additional information, we'll be adjusting our budgets accordingly. And those are the two legislative updates that I have this evening.
Probably where the governors knew, sometimes they signal where they're going to be, but there's probably no signaling.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Becky and I are monitoring the kind of the financial landscape, and hopefully we'll get some indication of Chapter 70 in the next couple weeks or a few weeks, but there's been no signals yet.
Okay. Thank you. And next, we're lucky to have our science department present tonight. We have some interesting instruction pieces over there.
So this evening we have our very talented Algonquin Regional High School Department Chair, Lori Zanini, for science. And before she begins, I just want to acknowledge Lori's leadership over the past 36 years.
One and only job.
So Lori has announced that she'll be retiring at the conclusion of the 23-24 academic year. So this is her final department chair presentation to the committee because it's every other year. So there'll be many opportunities to acknowledge Lorraine's great work in the months and year ahead. But I thought it would be nice just to acknowledge Lorraine and her great work. 36 years.
I'm lucky. I'm lucky to work with a great school system. Very supportive, leadership here. It's been extremely exciting to have Sean as the principal. I've worked with Greg in both of his roles and everyone else. So I can't thank everybody for providing me with a great opportunity to. So, anyways, let's go on to the science department. This is very easy for me to talk about. So thank you, Greg and Mr. Chairman and all the members of the central office and school committee members. I'm lucky tonight to be here with two of my department members. I have Dan Welty, who's going to talk about our physics department, and I have Dr. Brian Kelly, who will talk about the biology, and I'll cover the chemistry. Oops. And I think I just, yeah. Our focus this year has been back to the basics, and that really was something that Sean instilled on us at the beginning of the year. It's nice to go back to the basics after a couple of years of COVID and doing things a little bit differently. So Brian's going to talk about our MCAS preparedness, and we're really proud of where we're at with that. But again, our focus has really been providing your students with a strong lab-based science curriculum. And I really think if you were to come during the day and walk through the science department, you would see all of our students engaged in some kind of lab activity. Over the COVID years, we still provided it, but we were using some online tools also. So along with that, back to the basics, we're good old problem solvers. We're good old paper and pencil. So we don't rely on the technology as much as maybe others do, but we really are getting our kids into the science labs, looking at things analytically, collaboratively to solve the problems. Along with, we want our kids to be better scientific writers. So we've encompassed having kids write CERs with their labs, and we've been working with the middle school and asking them to have those kids practice those skills as they move up. We've worked on common midterms and finals. We've been doing that for quite a long time for our bio, chem, and physics. But since Sean's leadership has come on, we've really taken the time now to look at the data, analyze the data, to talk about it collaboratively, to see where we can make changes and improvements in our curriculum. Something that I think is really a strong benefit to our department are the PLCs that we offer, and that comes from our leadership team providing us that opportunity. We have 4 professional learning communities running right now. We have a biology, Brian will talk about that. We have a forensics, and I'll get to that, and fundamental chemistry and fundamental physics. So it's a great opportunity for teachers to collaborate twice a week in our rotation. Before the gentlemen here talk about the disciplines, I just want to look at our AP scores. Besides us being very successful in our biology MCAS, our AP scores are something to really highlight. And I think this comes from a couple of things. Our kids are really excited about taking AP courses here, but that comes from them being excited at the initial level. So the teachers that have these kids for year 1 in bio, chem, physics have to spark some kind of interest for them to want to go on and take it. We do offer 3 biology sections, 3 AP bio. We have 2 AP chem, 2 AP physics C, which is the tougher of the 2 physics, and 2 AP environmental. So those numbers have grown over the year, of the number of sections that we're offering. And you can see from the scores there how successful our students are compared to the global scores and the Massachusetts scores. They really do an incredible job. So we've got incredible teachers teaching it, both at the AP level, but also at the initial levels. Okay, I'm going to let Brian take over, but I just want to look at, when you look at the years of service, I think that's something to be noted. Teachers come here and it's like that destination school. It's something to be said when you see teachers that have been here 18 years, 14 years, Chrissy Conley, 22 years. And of course, we've got a couple of new teachers, but it says something again about your district, so. Okay, Brian.
All right.
Go for it.
Thank you. Again, as Lori said, thank you for having us tonight. I just want to start off, in biology, we are known as the MCAS subject of the sciences. And so we'll start right off by talking about how difficult the past 2 years have been just in the disruption, as we all know, of the pandemic, and there was a halting to the MCAS tests. And in science, with biology, we also faced a new computer-based test and a new test curriculum aligned with the 2016 curriculum frameworks based on the NGSS, the Next Generation Science Standards. And so we're really proud to say that as the biology team, we have been able to maintain our incredibly high pass rate and the meeting and exceeding expectations over the past 2 years, which is especially exciting for us because of the work we've been doing, as Lori said, in our PLCs this year and over the past 2 years. We have really been focusing the past 2 years as a team to create an experience for freshmen that not only teaches them the curriculum, but also transitions them into high school science and the high school life, which is often a very difficult transition, especially over the last couple of years. But the work we've been doing has really been focused on not only making sure that our curriculum is aligned to the new standards, but also that we don't teach to a test, that we teach and prepare for a test. So we focus a lot on what is going to grab the students in the sciences and get them interested, and what's going to be interesting to them, so that they buy into it and then become prepared for the test. Additionally, we've been aligning everything to our school's goals now, which are amazing. The ability to create an even playing field, create culturally responsive education, allow for critical thinking is by our Portrait of a Graduate that we are using. And so we have spent the past couple of years realigning a lot of our labs specifically for training in the CER model, the Claim Evidence Reasoning model. We have added in the past couple of years a co-taught class for English language learners. And because of that, we're very proud to say that every single language learner passed MCAS last year, which is terrific because of the fact that we are really, hopefully, we're doing our job to even that playing field and make this curriculum accessible. But also in our PLC, we've added some resources for MCAS. We spent a lot of time using our Canvas platform, a preparedness page for our MCAS, so students can log on, they can find videos, practice tests, resources, worksheets, everything they need, as well as coming after and getting help from our peer tutors as well as teachers. So what we've been doing over the past couple of years is really trying to keep our curriculum current and keep it interesting, grab the students, and make sure we are really fostering those critical thinking skills and leveling the playing field for our diverse student body. So thank you. I think that sums it up.
Awesome. Thank you.
Nice job.
Just some pictures of our bio students, and you can see the center slide on the bottom row is something that you'd see in our co-taught freshman biology class, so that we're acknowledging our ELL students. So, all right, chemistry. So you can see there's plenty of years of experience there. We do have two younger teachers. One, though, Josh came from another school, so he has some experience behind him. And then we've got Emma, this is her third year. So again, that experience is something to be acknowledged. Chemistry, very much, as I said before, we're really getting our kids into the labs, providing that strong hands-on experience, critical thinkers, and we've seen kids struggle. They don't like to be, I'm not telling you this right now, we're pushing them to think on their own. I can't look that up. No, you can't look that up. You can talk to somebody. So we're seeing kids challenged a little bit. You know, they're used to looking it up on the computer, but we're making them have good old conversation to solve their problems. And I think that's something that we're very proud of. Again, the CER is the Claim Evidence and Reasoning Good Writers. We have a PLC in our fundamental chemistry, and we do one in the fundamental physics. And this year our focus has been, we have a new teacher teaching the fundamental for the first time with an experienced teacher. So it's nice to give them the time to be able to collaborate, on that curriculum and to also grow that curriculum. The next thing I want to highlight is our Halloween show. We've been doing the Halloween show forever, and it is one of the highlights for a chemistry student. It's obviously in October. We use that Halloween demo day to really excite the kids on chemistry. All chemistry students come in. We do it 7 periods. We'll have 3 or 4 classes in a classroom, and we do 20 demos that we then connect throughout the year. And we'll say, oh, do you remember the whoosh bottle? Do you remember now seeing that? What kind of reaction is that? So I'm just going to show you real quick what it looks like. We spend a lot of time with the props, but you know, this was the highlight. This is the So we want to excite them. And
That was
that
a
clearly
TikTok
excites
video.
There was a fire extinguisher just off screen, by the way. I was aware when this,
We do.
I was there when this
We
happened.
have one teacher, I do the demo, and I pray every single time that nothing's gonna go wrong. Let me tell you. So I've got one more year to do it, and I'll make sure I have a waiver, okay, or something, some insurance policy. All right, so this, I'm sorry. Do I have to go out?
Yeah, if you go to there, that should do it.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna turn it over to Dan. You've got some wow factors too. But again, take a peek at the years of experience there, so. All right, Dan.
All right, thank you. So physics, obviously that's junior year, and one of the required science courses there. I think our teachers really strive to be, like the engineering design process, a lot of students are encouraged to be creative, apply physics to their real life, and obviously to solve problems. I think there's a variety of different engineering design process things that we do at that level. And one thing that I just found this year for my first time, spent a lot of time on Twitter, which is a big thing for education. There's a lot of teachers on Twitter. And there was a teacher in Connecticut that tweeted about this roller coaster project he did. And I remembered it, and finally I think in October I said, all right, I'm gonna tweet at him and get some more information. So hence these creations by my honors classes. There's like 12 more upstairs. But to see them go from this to that, it's been pretty amazing. With very, without seeing any ones that were built before. This was my first year trying that project. So it was all about conservation of energy. They had to figure out how to design it, put all the pieces together, design it, and then also do calculations though too, right? There are different measurements we took of height, speed, to look at how energy was conserved, transformed, and eventually how much was lost to thermal energy by the time it went from the top to the bottom. So that was used in a multitude of assessments as we went through our energy unit. PLC for physics. Nate Lardis and Ken Wadman have been working super hard all fall and now all winter to improve that course. And I know there's a lot more hands-on activities and more projects focused on that, connecting those kids' physics to the real world, as we do in all those classes. But I know they've been working super hard with that and really redesigning things. And even the midterm was much more redesigned than it has been in the past. So, but we're always working hard to come up with new ideas. We're always talking about what people are doing and sharing those ideas to try to make our classes as fun as we can.
And the kids did an awesome job on these roller coasters. I went in and just to see the kids engaged in, again, having those conversations, not looking up on the internet at how they're gonna do it. So, just some more activities in our physics class. Electives. So students here take 3 years of required science, biochem, physics, and then we have 11 electives that we offer in our department. 4 of the APs, but just as important as those APs, we have the additional courses, and I'm gonna highlight a couple of them. So first of all, we have 11 electives. We have over 550 students that take a 4th year of science. That's exciting to me, to see the kids want to go on and learn some other field. This year, we brought back forensics. It was on a hiatus. The teacher that had designed the curriculum here, she retired. Nobody was real eager, but we knew there was really a desire for kids to want to take forensics. We have 124 kids currently taking forensics. I've never taught forensics, and I am one of those teachers. And let me tell you, it's been exciting. And just in the news, from Massachusetts, they've provided us so much to talk about. We offer 6 sections right now, 3 in the fall, 3 in the spring, and it's just been really exciting, and the kids are so engaged. Dan teaches an innovations course, which I just want to point out, it's a great opportunity for kids to study what they want to. He allows them to pick a field, he supports them, he guides them, he, meets with them throughout, but it's really self-driven, which I think is exciting for kids. The other course that really gets a lot of boost is the organic chem. We're one of the few schools that I've mentioned this before that offer organic chemistry. Anybody going on in the fields of science, if you're going into pre-med, chemistry field, you have to take organic chem, and it's one of the harder sciences to take at the beginning. It's like that mental gymnastics. So I have a teacher that teaches it, extremely passionate, but kids come back and say, that was the most useful class I took in the science. You know, go figure. So, again, you know the other ones, but it's those couple I just wanted to give a plug to. You can see here, just the activities going on. The chemistry department does hot air balloons, so that's in the middle there. We had in the forensics class, over on the far right, we did sketch artist, so someone was given a picture, we used our admin pictures, and they had to describe to somebody else who their suspect was. The drawings weren't. We'll need to work with Amy Collins a little bit in her department, I think. And they were doing search patterns out on the football field, looking for pennies. I was surprised at how good they were, but they found all their pennies. We had a crime scene, so just some things that are happening. I mean, beyond our electives, kids have unbelievable opportunities after school. We have many clubs. We have our Science National Honor Society with Dr. Thompson. There's 73 students currently members. She brings in guest speakers. Those students provide peer tutoring before and after school. She gets them out into the community. I'm gonna fly through this only because I know it's moving on. Science Olympiad is run by Ken Wadman and Nate Largess in the physics. They have a competition in the springtime, so these students are meeting weekly, they're preparing. The Science Olympiad covers all sciences, so it's not just a focus on one area. We've got the Green Earth Club. So Chrissy Conley, the environmental teacher, she wants us to spread that environmental awareness, encourage sustainability. And last year, she was out in the fields removing your invasive plants on the property. So we've got a science research club, which was wonderful when Emma Terrasos came along. She was all for it, and that's the one where they compete at WPI in the spring. So she had students last year that were interested. She had 2 students that, went on, no, 3 students that went on to the state competition, sorry. HOSA, which has been run by Lori Mott, which focuses on the health sciences. So again, she's bringing in guest speakers. We had Dr. Medina who came in and gave up his time. They look at projects, and then in the springtime, they also compete in some of those health fields. We have WISE, Women in Science, run by Maria Homburg. Again, guest speakers. Last year, they wrote and illustrated books for the K-2 second graders in our district. This year, we've had kids that want to compete in the Chemistry Olympiad, so Catherine Burkett offered to, prep those students. And then I had a group of students that came to me and wanted to work on some science lessons that they hope to bring down to the middle schools and elementary, and they're called Atoms. So, with all that going on, this doesn't get done without an incredible department. I always have to give them the biggest applaud because they are the most passionate group of people that I've ever worked with. They're here early, they're dedicated. If you come to the building, you know that the science department is here by 6 o'clock. I mean, we've got a lot of people here early and they leave late. And they're passionate. They really, really are passionate people. So I thank them also for their incredible work. Anyone have any questions? I can answer them.
That was a fantastic presentation, and like all of those clubs on top of the great things that are happening during the day is amazing how many different opportunities the students have. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Questions, comments? Karen?
I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you. This is amazing. And, I just have to share that I have my daughter was a science major, and I shared with Ms. Zanini, her some of her activities that she's done at college, and it was just nice to see just how prepared she is and how passionate she is about science. And so it only comes from what she learned here. So it's just amazing. And thank you for the pictures, because oftentimes I get what'd you do today? How was school? It was fine. And I, nothing. So I love to see what they do in class. It's great.
Great. Paul?
I'll second that. I mean, my son is a science kid, I guess you'd say, and he's thrived here, and I just appreciate all the work you folks have done. I do have a question. This goes back, years ago, there was a consultant that came and talked to us about education topics in general, and one of them was how we teach math and science, I guess especially math. And shouldn't they be connected? And I know in physics, at least, they do, to some extent, teach math, because they have to. And I know I've heard from some teachers that, some of the things they're covering haven't been covered yet in math, so they have to teach it. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that, and if we would be better served by teaching them together more, so that, you're applying the math in a way that makes it more concrete.
Definitely talk to the math department, and I know physics has shared with the math department what units they're on, so that they can either pre-cover those topics, and if it fits in their curriculum, it might not fit in the flow, so then we take on the ownership of maybe pre-teaching some of the math. But there are conversations, but we could always do more conversations with the math department. I think we're all struggling with time to get our curriculum in.
Yeah, I guess, I'm not talking about you taking that on, I just mean as a philosophical discussion.
Philosophically, I definitely think they go hand in hand. There's a lot of math in chemistry.
Right,
And I know there's a lot of math in our AP bio class, so they're seeing it, but they're definitely applying the math and the science that they're learning.
right.
I don't know if I answered your question or. if it's
Yeah,
just more of a-
it's just something I've been thinking about for a long time, and I think it's a larger discussion, obviously, but, and I don't know if it fits with the Massachusetts frameworks and all of that, but it just seems worthy of exploration, I'd say. Thank you.
Yeah,
I
you're
mean,
welcome.
from a student side of that, I mean, taking AP Physics this year, where, like, Mr. Wadman has to teach us a lot of, like, the calculus. I'm sure Sean's talked to you about it, but,
That's
like,
where it's coming from, yes.
second day of school, we're learning how to take derivatives, whereas we don't get to that till like a month in calculus. But I think the science department does a great job kind of teaching that, as opposed to just assuming it's known. And I think it's just a way the timing works out, that to take AP Physics C, you'd need a calculus class before it, but that's kind of impossible. And I think they do a good job with it. And they're always willing to do more, whether it be Mr. Wadman, who teaches AP Physics, kind of staying after to go deeper into something, or Mr. McGrath, who teaches calc, explaining something from physics with kind of a more calculus background. Like, I know I've gone to him with my physics problems before and been like, Mr. Wadman has showed us how to do this in physics, but how does it kind of apply, or where does it come from? And he helps with that. So I think there's it takes a lot of kind of student initiative, but I think kids taking AP Calc and AP Physics have that initiative.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. My theory, I guess, would be that it would be easier to learn math if it was applied to physics.
I mean, that's kind of where math comes from physics, so that makes sense.
I think it comes a lot from the project-based and the hands-on
Yeah,
learning that
that's
they're
a-
doing too, where that's what you like to see the kids do, is to figure it out on their own. So that is very beneficial.
I don't want to let go either. It was early in the presentation about the success of students with MCAS. I mean, that's significant. It's not to be taken lightly and just brushed over. That was early in the presentation, but that's a lot of work, a lot of concern. But that competency determination's made from it, and they can go on and take other pieces because they've been able to be successful, and that's.
They've done an incredible
Yeah.
job. They really work collaboratively, that group, so,
So, that's impressive, yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, I just have one more question.
Yeah.
Speaking about that, in the co-taught ELL class,
Mhm.
like, that was awesome, that visual, and I would just love to maybe eventually pick your brain on that a little bit, because
It's been a
that is
great
like a
pairing.
model right
It's a
there.
great pairing,
Okay,
that biology teacher with our EL
Yeah.
spectrum teacher. She's great.
that's great.
And they have to be able to work together too.
Right,
It's
right.
And they gel. So the kids have been successful because of that. Yeah.
Anything else?
I'm jealous I had chemistry during COVID. That Halloween thing looks fun.
It was a bummer for me not to do it for 2 years, because that's one of my favorites. So, all right, well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Digging into academics, we're going to talk about recommended graduation.
Sure, so I'm very interested to see how Principal Bevan will top that presentation.
Do you have a whoosh bottle?
At the December meeting, Sean presented to the committee some graduation requirement changes. I did provide information in the packet for your review. Sean will review some of the recommended changes and answer any questions that you may have.
So unfortunately, I have no videos where things explode or like there's no fire, but this is a very important change that we've been giving a great deal of thought to here at the high school for some time, and this year we really invested a great deal of time looking really closely at what our options are to improve our graduation requirements so that our children's experience coming through the high school is the best fit for them and prepares them best for college and career after they leave us here from Algonquin. So in your packet is an official recommendation from me in really memo form outlining the change exactly in kind of dry terms and why the change is important. The slides here I'll be sharing are identical to what we looked at last month, but I will go through them just by way of review. Just to orient you to what our current graduation requirements are, which have been in place for, I'm sorry, I don't know, but decades for some time now. All students need to achieve 110 total credits, and then those credits need to be in a combination that is outlined here, of course. So all students need to have 4 classes of English, so each credit, each unit is 5 credits is a full year course, 2.5 credits is a half year course. So you can see them all up here, and this is the current state of our graduation requirements. The change I'm proposing and proposed in the December meeting is to make an adjustment to the digital literacy course, which is typically completed in our freshman year, and to make an adjustment in that lower requirement, which is to make our applied arts requirement, which is applied arts or fine and performing arts. It can be completed by, or that's a requirement that can be met by either, and to make a change by eliminating the applied arts portion of that and reducing it entirely just to the fine and performing arts. So, and additionally, I'm sorry I skipped over this because it's important. The digital literacy requirement would remain and be expanded to be met by another course that is another foundational course that meets just a different set of student interests. And the reasons why these are important changes are first, and really I have them in 3 categories. One is that our students and staff has spent the last several years improving and refining their skills in digital literacy more than probably any students who've come through. Some of that was by necessity during the pandemic, but also much of it was by design because as a strategic measure, our school and our whole district from K to 12 have been incorporating digital literacy and computer science into all of our classes and not just in a singular department. So from K to 12 in all departments, every teacher is looking at in some way to incorporate digital literacy and computer science. And that started last year in staff meetings and PD sessions. This year continued with our sharing out of what we call the DLCS toolbox, which is distributed to all of our staff members. And simply I'm sharing with you to let you know that our staff members are better equipped now to teach digital literacy such that making it a solo requirement in one department is not as necessary as it once was. Additionally, as I think we all have experienced as students, students respond to choice and they do better in classes that they've chosen to attend, and that this is an opportunity to expand choice for students, and every opportunity I can find to give students more choice within reason and in ways that are healthy and aligned with our goals, we are going to do that. The change for digital literacy to expand it to incorporate computer science, exploring computer science, would allow students to, if they have goals that are aligned to more around computer science than digital literacy, it allows them to create a greater foundation to pursue those goals later on in their high school career. And additionally, this is something that really speaks to targeting, or not targeting isn't the right word, but creating a change that will incentivize students to attend more fine and performing arts classes. So currently, in our current graduation requirements, because the requirement for applied arts and applied arts or fine and performing arts can be met by attending or completing a class in either section. You have the potential of a student graduating from us after 4 years and having never attended a class where they make music, where they create any piece of art, they don't draw, they don't use clay, they do lots of many other things, as you might have seen in our science department presentation, but that's something that we want to incentivize and really place a little bit of value on, more than is currently reflected in our graduation requirements. In order to understand this change between digital literacy and computer science, I outlined here the difference. They are two very different courses, even though there's about, I would just say, to be about a 15% overlap. If you were to create a Venn diagram, there are things in here specifically about students and their digital footprint that we think are important that all freshmen have. But from there, some of the changes are listed here. In digital literacy and computer science, that's the current course that is the only course that is required for freshmen. Not the only course that's required for freshmen. It's the course listed on that graduation requirement that we're speaking about, that there's no alternative to. That provides a broad introduction to a variety of technology topics and exposure to various digital literacy concepts and applications. And on the right-hand side, the Exploring Computer Science does many of those things, but also, or in addition, or in a deeper sense, provides a greater conceptual foundation for students who might want to pursue computer science. And some of that work, by the way, on the right-hand side, is analog work. It's work that they're doing pencil and paper. It might be work that they're doing. They're reading something. They're reading a hard copy book and text and talking about it. But it's creating the kind of conceptual underpinnings for students that will lead to success in computer science. And so that is the overview of the work we did over the course of, and just to add, I'm sorry, let me interrupt myself here. I'm going back. I incorporated this into the recommendation, but I don't think I mentioned it last time, or if I did, I did not highlight it closely. In looking at this work and generating this as a potential proposal, I ran it by and presented it to our school council, including Ben's on our, no, Ben's not on school council. We talked about it at the Student Advisory Council, with the school, Algonquin School Council, the APTO, and pretty much anybody who I could find to hear about this course and give me feedback on how these changes might impact our students. We got that feedback. It's incorporated into these changes, and those groups all have endorsed this change.
Questions? Can I, one thing, because I think it's just a shift. It's not really, can you just explain again that the applied arts credits are being eliminated there, but just a reminder for people from last time, like, it doesn't
Sure.
mean people won't be taking them.
That's
They're
right.
just covered other places. It's
That's
not,
exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think everyone understands we have perhaps the strongest applied arts and technology department in any school in central Massachusetts. I wouldn't put ours up against anyone's. And you see that reflected in not lots of ways, and sometimes you see it reflected in your own children's work, or you might see it in the strength of our DECA program. That affords us in some ways the ability to have such a strong, and that's primarily an electives department. That's where nutrition is, and early childhood education, wood technology, video production, in addition to all of our many business courses. So a student could very easily, in that bottom row that's grayed out here where it says electives, there's still 27.5 credits remaining for them to spend, if you will, in many other ways that could include all those things. And before you would get to a change where fine and performing arts was the solo requirement here for freshmen, before they graduate in 4 years, students will absolutely have taken a digital literacy or computer science, which is an applied arts course, and an economics class, which is also an applied arts course. So before you, even if this proposal goes through, which I hope it does, all students will have 5.0 credits in the applied arts, and that could mean that they never take another one. They're already at 5 credits, and 2.5 credits of 5. Does that answer your question?
Yep,
Sorry.
I just wanted to make that clear to anyone watching, or.
That's right,
that
yeah, there's still a
not
great
an
deal of
elimination.
credits
Yeah.
invested in the applied arts and reflecting our community investment.
Yeah, very strong, the marketing, all that stuff. So we're looking for a vote tonight, but, so we can have discussion and then a vote. Kathleen?
Good evening, thank you for that. I wanted to ask, is 110 a cap?
That's our cap, yeah.
That's your cap, okay.
Each school has a different number and some use different versions of credits. It's not exactly apples to oranges to school, and 110 is pretty typical.
Yeah, of course, I love seeing that the fine arts is getting its place, and of course, would love to lobby for more, to actually be a full year. One of the things that we see and I know that we're responsible for K to 12, whether they're here till 18 or 22. But when I look at the long-range investment, the return on investment of education, the way that people grow old with hobbies is really imperative. And one of the things I think is fascinating is that if you trained in music and you start to lose your hearing later in life, which is typical because we're outliving our hearing, if you had music training, you actually hear better than somebody else with equal hearing loss who didn't have music training. And the difference is significant because hearing loss alone can cause a 40% increase in the risk for dementia. So when I look at what is that long-range benefit of boosting that to a full year, I mean, that's not going to give them the protection for the musicians that are training for a full year, but I also think, how do you spend your time? And hobbies is really, really key, and hobbies that create social affiliation. If you've read Vivek Murthy's book, Our Surgeon General, on the public health crisis of loneliness, it's these type of activities that bring us together. And so beyond the preparation for vocation is how do we really instill avocation as a high value. So to that degree, I would like to just catalyze a conversation about increasing that to a year, not at the expense of anything else, but really seeing the long-range return on investment of that kind of a choice.
I do want to go back on something I said when you said, is it 110 a cap? That's the minimum. I think it was, when you said cap,
Yeah,
I was hearing minimum or thinking minimum. So every student needs 110 credits, but in fact, most of our students far exceed 110 credits. So it's not a cap, in fact, it's the minimum.
Okay.
That makes sense.
And
So,
what I love is that they could take something in art and really explore it, as you said, which you spoke to beautifully, as well as something in music, which both spurn hobbies that really support somebody aging well, and I think that's something that we want to see in our communities. That's an investment in education that is just magnificent in its return.
yeah, and any change, as you might imagine, any increase in the fine and performing arts or anywhere on that right-hand column except for the bottom electives would come at the expense of the electives, but many of those will be electives courses. So I do think, this will be something that we would monitor closely, see how students are responding, get feedback, and then see if it's a good fit for us for next year and whether or not further changes are a necessity would be something we can come back to.
I'd like
And
to
I-
ask to see whether that will
I-
have any stick.
Yeah, and I'd also, I think both of my sons got through Algonquin, no, one was in band, the other one did get through without taking any arts or band, so, and that always struck me as something he missed. So I think this is at least a step in the right direction for students to have those experiences, and then hopefully, as they said in the science thing, spark, those teachers spark an interest to to continue on with more electives and more parts, so I appreciate that that's separated out now.
Yeah, and I do also want to put in a plug for our really wonderful fine and performing arts staff, as much as our applied arts really just have a wide variety and a wonderful portfolio of electives offerings. Our fine and performing arts staff are really wonderful as well.
Forgot, he took, improv, which was
Oh, there you
perfect
go.
for him, so there we go.
Right.
Trying to,
And our fine and performing arts classes include very much beginner courses, beginning guitar, beginner art courses, and right up to much more sophisticated ensemble music courses.
yes.
Would this change apply starting with the incoming freshman class, or?
Yes, Ben, thank you for asking. Yes, they would start with the incoming
better
freshman
get it.
class and then grow with that class, yes. They would not be retroactive to. the-
Actually, Ben, you're going to have to start over.
Other questions, Matthew?
I didn't notice this till now. So I was trying to figure out what was missing. So foreign language is not a requirement for graduation.
That's correct.
Is there anything else that's missing other than foreign language as part of our curriculum?
Foreign language is not, you're exactly got it. Most of our students take at least 2 years of foreign language. It's kind of the most typical, and when I say 90, I don't know what the number is, but it's 95% or more maybe even. However, it's not reflected in our requirements. That goes back many years. I think that would be another area we should begin looking at. Foreign languages are so important, have always been, and I think in our global economy is increasingly important. And that's something we probably should examine. I don't think a school's graduation requirements should be ever evolving every year. I do think there's some stability to it, but we want to make sure every student who's coming through us in our school graduates with education that's reflective of the needs of being successful, that they need to be successful in college and career. It's an astute observation.
That's an interesting comment you just made, which was, you think 95% of the students have 2 years of foreign language? What percentage today of students have fine and performing arts?
From our school,
Yeah.
A high percentage. I don't know what number that is, but I can probably produce that for you.
It's interesting because we're making you're proposing a change because people are suggesting that we want to ensure that people have that opportunity. But it sounds to me like they're already doing it.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, this change to the fine and performing arts is to some degree reflective of what our current practice is and what students are typically leaving us with. But typical and 100% isn't the same, and so this would ensure that someone, like Mr. Shea was explaining, we wouldn't have a student leaving us having not ever stepped foot in an art class. So I do think, same with foreign languages, we have what's typical, and then what we have is our requirements should reflect what we think is totally necessary.
And I think there's other drivers about what students take. So that's our requirements, but then students looking to go to higher education, most higher education have their own requirements, which is foreign language, hence why my guess is a lot of students take that.
That's
Or,
right.
like mathematics is only 3 years, I believe.
3
but-
years,
But most students take 4 because of the college requirements and so on, so
And a good yardstick for that are the requirements UMass has produced, and off the top of my head, I think they do have foreign language requirements, so most of our students would meet that requirement, and that would be what our guidance department members are advising. But I think there's more work to be done, and I think this is a change that is a step in the right direction, but I do think we want to keep examining whether or not our graduation requirements are rigorous enough and whether or not they ensure that every student leaves our school fully prepared.
Kathleen?
I thought that was a great point to my new member. I look forward to meeting you later. I've asked for those numbers before about involvement in the fine arts, and I'd be grateful
Sure.
if that could be brought forth. Thank you.
I thought, last time you provided us a lot of statistics. I'm just wondering if we, I don't know if those were in there.
I can have
Yeah,
them, yeah.
sure.
My guidance department has them pretty handy.
Yeah.
I think what we will find out is large percentages of students do take one or more or many fine arts classes. Many of our students take 2 years of foreign language, and I can produce those, and we can come back to that, sure.
So we're looking for a vote tonight on this, the school can take direction about whether we're moving forward with these or not. I think it has to be communicated to the incoming 8th grade pretty soon, so I guess I'd be looking for a motion, and then we can discuss the motion.
I'll make a motion that we accept the proposed changes, for the graduation requirements as presented tonight.
Motion by Karen, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Kathleen. Further discussion? Chris, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I was just gonna make a comment related to, I guess, the foreign language requirement, which would be, do you find that you get requests to waive any of the graduation requirements for students that are having difficulty meeting the 110 standard?
The 110 is usually not the barrier.
And what I mean is one of these specific
One of these
requirements.
specific ones. I've not, since I've been here as the principal at Algonquin. In my former school, where we did have the foreign language requirement, which was 2 years there, the foreign language requirement, I'd have a few waivers each year for students with language-based disabilities, and I would sign off on those, and we would waive that requirement for students in that case, and it was a very low number each year, but for those students, that was a real need.
So I guess what I would say is my concern with adding a foreign language requirement would be specifically for those students. I wouldn't necessarily want those students to have to reach out to get the blessing of the administration to waive those requirements. Whereas I think we have more infrastructure in place to support students that have specific learning disabilities with the requirements that we have here. That's just a general comment.
We have a motion on the table. Any other discussion? Okay, so all in favor of the recommended changes? And that's unanimous, so that passes.
Thank you, everyone.
So can I just make a quick comment? So I just want to thank Sean and his leadership. I think this required a lot of navigation of different departments, a lot of great conversation. And I think ultimately what I see as a great opportunity is really student advocacy and student choice, where at one point we were asking all students to take this particular course. Now we're providing some advocacy and choice of students to be able to go in a direction that they wouldn't have been able to in prior years. So I think that's a good shift in the right direction.
Thank you, I'm excited about it, yeah. And I will report back and make sure I let you know how it's going.
Thank you. And so next up is the superintendent's report.
And Principal Bevan will give the principal's update.
Sure, all right, I will hand it off to myself here. All right. Last night we had a really exciting event here at the high school, and some of you were here to enjoy it. And I've made mention of this award before, so I won't spend too much time. But last night was our unveiling of the National Unified Champions banner, which will hang in our gym. And we had an event at halftime of a big basketball game between us and Shrewsbury, a game we won. And at halftime we had many of our Unified champion students attend. And Unified Sports, without over-explaining, if you're not familiar, is a sports program that is aligned through Special Olympics, where students with disabilities play alongside students without disabilities in all kinds of sports. And we have one of the strongest unified programs around, and I've said this before, but at my former school, I came here, when I was principal at my former school, I came here to learn about Unified, so I could bring it back to that school, and I launched it there because of what I had seen and the strength of this program here, and the program I launched there remains. And we were a Unified Champion school as well there after that. So it's a banner we win. You get it for 4 years, and it's based on meeting 10 criteria of excellence of your program. And last night it was just a wonderful celebration that had many different features. It was terrific. Just a heads up, and part of this is just promoting an event I'm very excited about, but also to let you know something we are doing based on some of the data we have about how students are struggling with mental health, and to respond to, as Superintendent Martineau said, student voice. Two of our senior students, Sadie Candela and Sarah Medina, had talked to me at the end of the summer, beginning of the school year, and said we'd like to do something where we provide a voice to students about, or support for students about their mental health, but specific to athletes who I think gain the benefits, the mental health benefits of athletics, but also have a lot of the challenges of time management, of performance anxiety, of diet, of many things. And so we have a speaker coming in on February 9th, and she will be doing a panel discussion with some of our student athletes that will just be for athletes. We're canceling practices that day. And the teams that could have moved games or practices could not have done that are still practicing, but most of our teams will be there, and that will be their practice for the day, and there will be a virtual night in the evening. Dr. O'Brien comes to us from Boston Children's, and she also is an assistant professor at Harvard University, where she played ice hockey and was a national champion ice hockey player.
May I ask a question on that?
Yeah, sure.
Is that just for high school students?
That's just for high school students currently, except the virtual parent will be open to anyone who cares to. The in-person session will be directly after school, so students don't have to leave and go home and come back. It really is open just to the high schoolers for the student session. The parent session is open to not only anyone here in our community, but the link would be open to anyone. My goal is that we make an event like this something we repeat every year, that we take time out of our school year and our athletics year to attend to student athletes' mental health, and to incorporate that in kind of a spiraled kind of way where our coaches are getting the kind of information and training and understanding that they need to support their students. I do want to make sure I recognize that Be Well Northborough has kindly funded this, are kindly funding this event. They funded an event for us on marijuana and teen marijuana addiction in the fall. They're wonderful partners of ours. I will let you know how that goes. I have high hopes for it. And then this is something that happened in the fall, and it was probably it was not widely reported, but it has changed some of how we do business here at the high school, and I just want to make sure the committee is aware and maybe walk you through what it looks like. So in October of 2022, Massachusetts passed an act addressing barriers to care for mental health, which was a sweeping and very lengthy series of changes that impacted lots of different areas of the Commonwealth and different agencies, and in there was a pretty significant change to how schools use discipline or discipline certain assigned consequences to students who violate their school's handbook rules. It was a major shift that we learned about with about a week's notice, and had to be implemented on November 8th with almost no time to prepare, and a lot of schools were scrambling, and we got a lot of really good advice from our attorney, and other principals relied on each other to just help navigate this. And I'm happy to say I think we got to a very good place very quickly, and I'm going to just walk you through what that looks like. In general terms, the requirement limits schools' ability or encourages, or requires, in fact, schools to seek alternatives to outside suspension, with the presumption that, or the basic understanding that outside suspensions are really not healthy and not productive and not educationally productive or good for the student who's being outside suspended, and when they return from school they're behind, they have a harder time catching back up, and there's lots of reasons why outside suspensions are not all that helpful for students who are getting outside suspended. At the same time, I think you understand students who get outside suspended got outside suspended for reasons that are certainly understandable why schools have been using that tool for decades and decades. The requirement, we are now required additionally, in addition to seeking alternatives, but to document the use and results of the alternatives we are trying instead of outside suspension. And there are exceptions, however, so this is not to say that we cannot use the outside suspensions ever again. They still happen, they just happen much lower rate, and things that used to be outside suspendable are no longer, and we're using different methods that I'll talk to you about in a moment. The exceptions include when the alternatives are unsuitable or counterproductive. That's pretty broad language that schools can use to their benefit when really outside suspension is the best option. But the suspensions involving weapons, drugs, assaults of school staff, or felony charges remain very much remain suspendable, and we would be using suspension in those instances very likely here at Anon. I would say in broad terms that the emphasis of this law is to use this as a disciplinary event as an opportunity to repair harm or perceived harm a student might have done to someone else or to their school environment, and to improve that behavior, rather than, and what they're reducing here is reducing the emphasis on punishment and using discipline as a form of punishment. And that really is a shift in thinking for a lot of schools. I think here at our school and under my leadership, it's not a huge change, because even for students who do things very much suspendable, those are opportunities to redirect a student and to get them to understand that their behavior has consequences, and to find ways to redirect that behavior. So I will walk you through like just one singular potential, very vague, kind of not a lot of details here, but I'll talk to you about what it might look like if this were to happen here at Algonquin now under this current change. So if the handbook violation were that a student were under the influence of alcohol at a school event, and that does happen from time to time in a high school environment, at a dance, at a football game or something, that has happened. Typically, and I'm going back years and years, a pretty typical suspension length for that would be 3 to 5 days of outside suspension, depending on a lot of factors. A lot of it depends on what that student's disciplinary history is before that event, how they respond in the event. There's lots of factors that might impact the length of that suspension, but 3 to 5 days would be pretty typical, and there's no industry standard, but if there was one, that would be pretty close to it. Now, there would be lots of options to consider, and I have a list here on the right, and I'll talk you through in my next slide what a potential actual singular way to process this might look like. We would meet as a team, my assistant principals and I, and talk through what are ways we can redirect this behavior. How can we avoid an outside suspension and still have the student reflecting on their choice and restoring and repairing the harm that they've done to the trust we have in them. So here are some options. We've now developed a Saturday school, which is exactly what it sounds like. And I know in your brain you're thinking, is that the Breakfast Club? And it's pretty much the Breakfast Club. So without all the crazy things that happen in the school. It is Saturday school, and students do not want to miss their set. They do not want to be here at school on Saturday, and they prefer an outside suspension in a lot of ways. And then the next bullet is one we're relying heavily on, and we've already used quite a bit, is to have students do something that gives back to our school community. They might clean out a school storage locker. They might inventory. We've had students inventory athletics gear, and this is happening either on a Saturday or during a school break like April break. We are increasingly relying on the attraction of social events like our big dances and our other things that are heavily social, because that is something that students value heavily, and probably even more than missing a full school day. Loss of athletics is also part of the equation more than it's ever been. And then to some degree, we've also even been using instances where we're tracking a student's attendance and their discipline throughout their school day and asking teachers for feedback, and using those as like almost granular pieces of evidence to redirect that student's behavior, which students don't enjoy, you can imagine, but also we're just looking for them to bring their behavior up to the standard that most other students can achieve without trouble. So in an instance like this, I would say if a student in some event soon were to do what's listed there under the influence of alcohol at a school event, what might ultimately come about is what's there in red is we'd have an investigation and hearing, conclude that a violation of the handbook occurred, and then 3 full days of community service, inventorying athletic gear over the April break. That's highly specific, but that would be very likely as we're nearing February and April break. We look at those, if a student gets themselves into a suspendable trouble, that would be something we would be looking at. We would, if it was an upperclassman, we might be looking at like the loss of prom with the ability to earn it back if they string together a month of, you know, good behavior. So we're always looking for ways to incentivize students to just simply behave in the ways we would like them to. And I'm a big believer in pulling back something very attractive like prom with the ability for a student to then do just simply the things that we want to reward them with, and then potentially have them have that experience back. And then there would be a re-entry meeting and a return to school. But in this case, since they weren't ever out of school suspended, that return to school really is just that they were never exited from school. There might be a processing of how did we get here, how can we avoid getting here in the future. Are there any questions? Yeah, John.
Are you telling us this? Are you?
Yeah, sorry, I'm not looking, I'm just alerting you to, this is a pretty, for our offices, it's a pretty big change. And probably in the history of our school and Massachusetts school, it signifies a pretty large change for the school when we interact with those families. This is just by way of like letting you know.
May I make a comment?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So, or I guess as a question first, is there an honor code that's applied to athletics that they are separate from this? Because in my opinion, it should be standard that if a person that's on an athletic team is caught under the influence of alcohol, it should be automatic that they're not allowed to participate for some duration on that particular team, period, end of story. And I
Sure.
appreciate that goes against what
Yeah,
we're talking
yeah.
about here, but there has to be some sort of repercussions, in my opinion, so.
So there's very much, and this is a topic that all administrators are well aware of and have worked through a lot. The MIA has a chemical health policy that any student who violates the chemical health policy loses 25% of their next contests, so the next 4 games or whatever, for a first offense. A second offense, I think it goes to 60%.
So that's in addition to this.
That would be in addition to this, and that is beyond our control. There would be no changes. We would do a hearing, and if our conclusion was a student had violated our handbook policy by being under the influence of alcohol, the MIA suspension would also kick in, and that absolutely would happen. Some teams may have their own, repercussions. So if a student's a captain, there might be the natural consequence of losing a captaincy. That's something we navigate on a case-by-case basis. But I wouldn't say there's an honor code. In fact, MIA is very clear. This rule's been in place for 12 or 14 years, and it's frankly very difficult to apply uniformly and fairly, but it's one that's felt very intensely by the students who lose a quarter of their senior fill-in-the-blank season basketball, baseball.
Thank you.
Sure. And I would say, in terms of voting, eventually the handbook comes to us for approval, so any changes in the discipline will be in the handbook, and that'll be up for us to review and approve in probably May or June or something like that.
Yeah.
But Chris?
There's potential, I'm sorry, Mr. Carbino, there's the potential that this is so deep in the practice of how we apply what is under the discipline code that it might not be reflected, but I will make sure that there's nothing that is not reflected here or
Yes.
inconsistent with what's here.
No, absolutely. I think, first of all, I'd like to just say that I want to preface what I want to say here by stating that you're doing this to comply with the law.
Right.
Now, personally, I'm not a huge fan of this. It is the law, but my concern in the general sense is, and I can kind of see where they're coming from. So if you have a student that is excessively tardy or excessively absent from the school, the last thing you want to do is reward them with an out-of-school suspension. So I think that's where a lot of this comes from, but my general concern is, I understand where this comes from, especially when you're dealing with younger students, and this is just more of a soapbox commentary, and that is that we are trying to make sure that we are developing citizens that have respect for rules and understanding that breaking rules in a civilized society has consequences. And I've always felt that schools have kind of a soft touch policy anyway. You're trying to really encourage the right behavior from students, which is what you're looking for. My concern, and it really isn't the concern of the schools as much, but my concern is that when these students, and I would be interested in hearing about recidivism, so when you're talking about these types of punishments, how many students are going on to reoffend? Because it's not really a punishment. It's more of a think about what you did, how did it affect people. I understand where that's coming from. My concern is that this is going to hit some students pretty hard when they get out into the real world, and there's no, when you get pulled, I'm a driver's ed instructor, when you're pulled over and issued a ticket, there's no explanation as to why. You get the ticket and you have to deal with it. There isn't, well, why were you speeding? And, well, why was your foot down so hard on the gas pedal? So, again, my point is simply that I totally understand that we're doing this to comply with the law, but I personally don't think this is necessarily the best discipline system that we should have going forward. That's just a
General comment. I don't think this drastically changes the practices at Algonquin Regional High School. I think if you look at the genesis of the law, there are many school districts that significantly choose out-of-school suspension. If you look at schools where there's a high minority population, socioeconomic, they use this as their primary disciplinary mechanism. It's to make sure that all districts across the Commonwealth look at alternatives to suspension, and when suspension is appropriate, suspend. So I don't think this change in law is necessarily directed at an Algonquin Regional High School. It does have some implications, but just having observed Sean and prior leadership administer the disciplinary code, I don't see this as a significant change to the current practice here in our district.
Yeah, just to be clear, we, at this point, halfway through the year, Monday is the first day of semester 2. I don't think we're into double digits of suspension days for all of our students in total. And so, and that's not because we suddenly are soft on student misbehaviors. That would have been true if this law didn't come through. But I will say, when we get what is a pretty conventional misbehavior that had like an easy kind of go-to punishment that conformed with what we had done for 20 years, now we're coming back and saying, we're now required to come at this a little bit differently. What might it look like? And we have the luxury of not having a lot of suspendable behaviors, so we can take our time and have those conversations. But yeah, I think it's fair to worry like it will suddenly signal a lowering of standards, and we want to monitor for that.
But I think it's also important to note that this law is pre-K through 12. Mm-hmm. So our middle schools, elementary schools also have to adhere to these new disciplinary requirements. So it's a common, a commonality that all schools across the Commonwealth now have, and I think we have excellent legal counsel, helped us navigate learning about this, and I think all of our principals pre-K through 12 have done a nice job trying to make sure we are adhering to the new requirements.
Speaking of that pre-K to 8, I guess the question is not just for the high school, but because it is the district's done work on, collaborative problem solving and restorative practice, training, because that kind of gets in it, but you can't, you need support in understanding and learning it.
Right, like most changes in requirements and laws, you're not always given
Notice.
So I think we do have work to do in terms of, social justice and restorative practices, and, working with our, surrounding districts around what does that look like? How do we, obviously we are in the business of educating students and making sure that we know students are going to make bad decisions. How do we help students, when they make poor choices, learn, understand the severity of a choice they've made, and then move on and make sure that they don't repeat those mistakes. So there's a lot of.
Yeah, and restore their actions with the community members that
Correct.
were impacted, yeah. Yeah, okay.
I just will make one last comment. This is a very public measure too. So oftentimes you'll have a situation at a school where another student is impacted or a group of students are impacted. And many parents want to see justice. And oftentimes those parents will want Principal Bevan to suspend. So I think part of this is community education around what this law is, what we can and can't do, and why what you may think as a parent the consequence should be, that might not be aligned to what we're required to do. So some of this is education with our educators in classrooms, with our parents in the community, and again, we have work to do in this area.
Yeah, but I'll just say as a parent, I love that punishment. Instead of them being at home for 3 days doing nothing. Go do some community service and earn back the right to go to the prom. Like, I think that's good, personally.
Paul?
I agree with Karen. I like this approach, and I commend you for coming up with it so quickly. I wouldn't mind hearing more details on the earn back area, though. I mean, I'm trying to envision how that would work. I mean, if you show up under the influence at a school event, how do you earn that back? I mean, short of not showing up.
Yeah. Let me think, just off the top of my head, I can remember, and this preceded this, so I was structuring some of our disciplines similar in kind of concept to this. We had some students make some unwise choices last year around this time, and they had, I can't recall, or it was, maybe it might actually have been after prom, and they were coming up on senior week, and so the ability to attend senior events really hinged on their completion of the community service, their behavior in school to earn back the ability to attend the senior week events. So these are things lots of principals have used to we want to see students attend these events. We want to see them there. We want to enjoy those events with them. But you gain a great deal of leverage over a student who might be for proclivity to misbehave, and saying, that dance that you have been planning on attending for a long time, you can't attend until you do the following things for 3 weeks between now and then. And that's all we're looking for. Attend every class, no class cuts, no misbehaviors, no nothing. So it might not be, Mr. Desmond, aligned exactly like we don't have a huge number of frequencies of students arriving intoxicated to events, but you broaden the umbrella and say all behaviors count now and you've got to earn it back. It wasn't a really specific example, but.
I mean, I would just add that you've created, sitting down with students, a letter of expectation. And it's been a conversation with the student. If you meet all these expectations and you are a good citizen of Algonquin Regional High School, then you can earn back X, Y, and Z. And that is something that Principal Bevan has used with a number of students, and it's worked well when we have time. So it's when something happens and then the dance is the next day. So, but,
A week later.
yeah.
Without you giving a lot of details, I can think of another one in the recent past where a student did something that was would have been in a previous iteration, 2-day suspension. And we said, we're going to give you a month where after 2 weeks, if you don't do the following very basic things that we're really happy for you to do every day and be successful and get all your work in and not class cut and whatever, we'll, at the end of the first 2 weeks, we'll take one of those days of suspension out. We'll have held it in abeyance and pull it away, but you still got 2 more weeks to complete, strong academic performance, attendance, you name it. And if you do that and you do that successfully, and we're getting feedback on the daily from teachers, we'll pull that second day away that we held in abeyance. So now you have had 2 days of suspension in concept, kind of as leverage over a student, and in 2 increments had gotten a month of what for that student was sensational behavior, but is simply the kind of behavior we want to see from them. Like that would be the kind of thing we were doing in the last couple of years and would conform and meet this law. So it's not a major shift for us, but I think the optics in our community might be if you have students who might in a spectacular kind of way, be intoxicated at an event and might be at school on Monday, that would look very different than it did even last year. And so now this will be a bit of a change.
I think we have one more question, Kathleen.
Sorry.
Who's the poor bloke that's over at giving up their April break? And how do we balance that sacrifice?
We had 3 days of after-school detention, and after school detention, we basically reduced it down to, I think, 2 days a week, and took the kind of the hourly pay that we pay somebody to do after-school detention 3 days a week, and dedicated it to 2 Saturdays a month. And we have a staff member who does that. They come in, they take attendance, and kind of walk through what the expectations are.
And I think if you needed other ideas, doing service at the senior center might also be something very, very helpful and community-based.
Yeah, we're always looking for ideas. We
I
have
like the
a
idea
Google
of
Doc of the
stinky
things that need to
activity
get done
about-
around the building and can be done and contribute back to our community. Ideally, we're aligning whatever the misbehavior was with something that aligns as tightly as possible and is as directly as possible to the behavior, and that the consequence of the behavior align. It's not always easy to do.
Is that the end of your
That's
report?
That
Okay.
is, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. We also finalized our bell schedule, which in many schools is and it has been a conversation in our school for quite some time, and I'm just happy to share the results of the change. So if you're a really astute observer and have studied our current bell schedule very closely, you will notice some differences, but I will walk you through them anyway. So our current bell schedule has very quickly, to my mind, gained a lot of traction in our school. I did a lot of surveying of students and of staff. Most lately in December, we did a school-wide survey of students and got exactly a sense for what they're responding to about our current bell schedule, which is very different than the bell schedule we've tried in previous years, which were all Monday through Friday bell schedules. The schedule we landed upon is not some wildly innovative bell schedule. It's probably similar to about a quarter or a third of the schools similar to ours, so it's not a wild innovation. It is a very stable bell schedule where it rotates, all 7 classes rotate in, we call it a full rotation, and 1 class drops each day. The things that remain in next year's bell schedule are that the full rotation remains. It actually it goes in the opposite direction. So teachers felt there was kind of a lengthy conversation. As principal, I don't feel strongly which direction it rotates. And what I mean by that is day A goes A through F, and then G drops, and then day B, B, C, D, E, and on, whereas our current schedule, the first block of that second day would be the last block that didn't meet the first day. So the first day, the first class of the second day in that colorful column would be G, A, B, C, D. So I don't want to bore you with so many details here, but that is something our staff was really interested in pursuing. 1 drop block each day does not change either, and what is changing is that Titan Day, which is our static fixed Monday, is just not working. Our staff is not, just does not see the benefits of it that they anticipated, and they were really proponents of it, as was I. I thought they would deliver more benefits than it has. I don't think it's impeding learning. I just think it's not delivering the benefits that are worth how dysregulating it can be often. And then the long block, which is currently our 3rd block, is not one that is delivering the benefits we anticipated either. And so what that looks like, I'll kind of show you. And then there's this, and then naming of days. So that's a bit of a cosmetic change. So the way we have days that are named by numbers and the blocks by letters, now we are aligning the names of the days to the first period that meets on that day. And then you'll notice on the left-hand side, the class lengths are equally distributed. That's a very dense amount of information, but I think it's about 90% of what our current schedule is, which is generally agreeable to a very large number of our students and staff, and it takes the things that they were not crazy about and alters them.
So just state one point around the visual on the screen is that this represents a lot of input and feedback from faculty and staff and students. A lot of great conversation. there is no such thing as a perfect schedule. And I think this schedule that Principal Bevan is shifting to is not his schedule, but rather reflective of a conversation with faculty and staff and students to actually improve what currently exists today. So I think a lot of conversation and discussion to get to this point. And I would also state that what weighed heavy on some of these changes is input from students. There was a lot of great student input and feedback to make some changes that I think will really help us move forward next year.
Yes, and I will close by saying, and I have one last thing after I get to that, but I will just in general terms indicate that I do think we need a year or a year and a half of this schedule to finally see the benefits that it could provide. I don't know that it's healthy or it's really anybody's preference to continue to examine a schedule and be in a perpetually looking at this. I think we need to see how it goes for a couple of years and then see if any changes are necessary after that time. This schedule delivers some efficiencies of time that we would be overshooting. It would result in more instructional and more time on learning by DESE's definition than we're required to by about 6.5 hours over the course of a year. So it allows us to, as a minor, tiny change going into the year, look at ways to redistribute some time, maybe extend some passing times, maybe extend some lunch, or maybe even have some 20-minute blocks here and there in the year where we can provide students with an opportunity to attend an activities fair, have some type of musical interlude in the day. There's lots of ways we are looking at how to do that, and we will be doing some piloting of those surplus time opportunities in quarter 3 and quarter 4. Yeah.
Just one question, is Titan Day an A day? How's Titan Day different?
Titan Day, if you look closely, an A day drops G block there, and
Gotcha.
the alternate day, which is what we call Titan Day today, meets every class.
Every day,
Yeah,
yep, gotcha.
and the classes are shorter, and they're like 45 minutes, yeah. So we would use the alternate day, I would anticipate like the first day of every quarter.
Right,
Or the first day
exactly.
of semester 2, or the first 3 days of school, where we're still
Yeah.
finding our sea legs, that kind of thing.
Yep, got it.
Ben, did you have that? Okay.
Matthew, did you have your hand up?
I think he answered it. I was
Answered,
like, when
okay.
is an alternate day gonna be used? But
Yeah.
he answered it.
I think that concludes my principal's report. It was a lengthy one. Thank you.
Thank you. Turn back over to the superintendent for
Sure, so.
fascinating enrollment
Yes,
numbers
so,
and budget numbers.
In your packet is the enrollment report as of December 16th, 2022. So as you all know, enrollment this time of year remains pretty steady. We had two less students in December than we did in November, and we have 1,215 students enrolled at Algonquin Regional High School. Also in your packet are financial reports, and I will turn it over to Becky Pellegrino, who will provide the FY23 monthly general fund expenditure report and the FY23 statement of revenue.
Good evening. So the report that is included in your packet is as of December 31st, 2022. And this marks actually the completion of the first 6 months of fiscal year 23. So we are halfway through the fiscal year. As of that date, we had $571,626, or 2.22% remaining on the bottom line. We continue to trend very closely to where we were last year at this time, where we had $557,311, or 2.23%. So we're pretty much dead on with where we were last year. We are starting to keep an eye on our teacher and our nurse substitute line items. And these line items are ones that we are watching in addition to the utilities that I had previously mentioned. Also in that packet, you will see the athletic revolving account, and you'll note that as of December 31st, we had expended $123,472. Not to jump ahead to my next report, but the statement of revenue does show that we have received $170,000 in athletic fees and gate fees. So at this time in FY23, we are sustaining the revolving account budget by these fees. And I welcome any questions on either of those reports.
No questions. We need a vote to accept the general fund expenditure report until audited.
So moved.
Chris,
Second.
Paul, all in favor? Got that. Unanimous, and so statement of revenue,
Okay.
you already
I already
alluded to
touched
it.
on a little bit, but, so during the month of December, we did receive the town of Southborough's assessment payment. We also received our regular Chapter 70 and charter school tuition reimbursements. The one item that we still have not yet seen is the regional transportation reimbursement. Last year, we did receive that in February, and the prior year, it was in March, so hopefully this year it will be in January if they're moving forward each year. The other thing that I did want to mention to you is with the athletic fees, we did receive just over 170,000. That marks about 2/3 of what our projections were, which is very close to where we would expect to be at this point in time, considering we have completed the fall season and we're pretty much, we're well into the winter season, but it really is at the athletic fees that we are looking at now versus the athletic fees. And then you will notice that overall, we have received 49.64% of what we anticipate receiving in terms of revenue. So again, halfway through the year, we're right on with our projections.
Questions about revenues? Need a motion to accept the revenue statement until audited.
Moved.
Paul, second.
Seconded.
Karen, oh, sorry, Karen's hand first, sorry. All in favor? Unanimous, that passes.
So also in your packet is the FY '24 budget priorities, the FY '24 through FY '28 capital plan, and the FY '24 budget calendar. And I will note that we did add the town meeting dates. So for Southborough, the town meeting is March 25th, and for Northborough, it is April 24th. So at this point in time, I will share with the committee the revised preliminary budget presentation. So I'm not usually able to guarantee too much to the committee, but I can guarantee that my presentation is not going to be as exciting as Lorraine's presentation. So this evening I'm presenting the FY '24 revised preliminary budget. I will share that not too much has changed from the preliminary budget that was presented in December, but I will highlight the changes that have taken place. So I think it's always important to talk about our purpose. We are mission and vision driven. This evening through the science presentation, the principal report, you heard about opportunities for students to kind of achieve that portrait of the graduate and become collaborators, critical and creative thinkers, communicators, be civically engaged, growth-oriented, and healthy and balanced. The fiscal year 24 is well underway. The budget process is well underway, and I'll highlight that it is a process. I'm finding it hard to believe that it's January 18th this evening. And as you can see, January, February, March, and April are real key months in terms of moving this budget forward and presenting it to the town meeting voters for hopefully approval. So the budget variables at this point in time, so there are a number of budget drivers and variables that we're experiencing. So one of the unknowns at this point is collective bargaining, specifically cost of living agreements. We are engaging with the association on January 26th to begin negotiate COLA. That is an unknown at this point. We talked about out-of-district special education funding, the 14% increase. We'll be advocating for increased circuit breaker to mitigate that cost. Special education transportation. So Marie and the Student Support Services team is trying to project what transportation costs will be for FY24. Increased energy costs, costs of supplies and materials, cost of services, insurance rates. So we are seeing the impact of inflation and the power of a dollar, and it is impacting our overall budget. And lastly, insurance rates. We did meet with our insurance consultant to get an idea of what budget percentage to include in the fiscal year 24 budget. So we were given a number of anywhere between an 8 to 10% increase over fiscal year 23, which is significant. We are hoping that is not the case, and we're working closely with our consultant to make sure we get the best price possible. I will share that the consolidation that Northborough and Southborough did to move to a single provider in coordination with Algonquin has helped. We have a much larger pool of subscribers, and I think it makes us a more, gives us more power in terms of trying to negotiate the best rate possible. So in your packet, I did include the budget priorities. For the purpose of this presentation, I'll just speak to the fact that the budget priorities are essential in the work that we do as a leadership team. It helps us determine what to prioritize in terms of what to move forward in terms of goals. And also a key document that helps us in the work is also our strategic plan, Vision 2026. We continue to benchmark against our 5 strategic objectives and make sure that the budget provides opportunities for students to, again, achieve the portrait of a graduate and graduate being prepared for a college career or whatever their next adventure might be. So where are we today in terms of the preliminary budget, revised preliminary budget? So in December, I presented a budget that was reflective of a 5.57% increase over fiscal year 23. The leadership team, directors, Becky, Keith, Stephanie, and I met many times to think about what does the budget landscape look like, what do we want to accomplish, and were there any opportunities to kind of reduce the percent increase over fiscal year 23. The work that we did resulted in about a % reduction in the overall budget request at this point in time. So this evening, we're presenting a $26,884,172 budget, which reflects a 4.5% increase over fiscal year 23. And I will share that there are a lot of projections in this number. Again, not having the state numbers in terms of Chapter 70, minimum local contribution, circuit breaker, regional transportation. There are just a lot of unknowns at this point, and this budget is built on using the FY23 numbers that we do know. So in terms of the comparison between the preliminary and revised preliminary, I will highlight the third row, special ed out-of-district transportation. So unfortunately, this number increased from our preliminary. So again, working with the Student Support Services team and really trying to project special education transportation costs, we did see an increase of about $35,000. Also, salary increases in COLAs. We projected for the preliminary $724,328. We worked very closely on looking at personnel and personnel requests for fiscal year 24, and we did reduce that to $599,728. And I will just put an asterisk there. that we are still in contract negotiations, and this is subject to change based on how negotiations move forward. So the revised preliminary budget drivers total $1,360,493. Budget offsets, so comparing what was presented from the preliminary to the revised preliminary, we did increase our circuit breaker tuition reimbursement offset by about $125,000. We also, salary increases in COLAs by $50,000, retirements and leave of absences, $123,000, and then special education adjustments of about $125,000. So the budget offsets total $1,296,840, which is a significant increase over the preliminary budget that was presented in December. So the budget that is being presented this evening as the revised preliminary does not have any recommended staff reductions. I will note that we are seeing a slight decline in our enrollment in fiscal year '24. However, I think it's an opportunity for us to continue to really make sure that our class sizes are healthy, that students have opportunities to make connections with adults, and again, help students achieve our mission and vision that we have established. One of the impacts of the budget reductions is something that we have not done in the past for since my tenure in the district, and that is utilization of a small portion FY24 circuit breaker, and what the impact is that it could impact circuit breaker in 25. So usually we spend circuit breaker in the second year, and in the FY24 budget we are recommending expending $125,000 in FY24. In terms of staffing requests that are not in the budget at this point in time, and I will note that we still have a lot of conversations as a leadership team working toward the February recommended budget presentation. We did ask the leadership team to prioritize the positions, and on the screen you can see the priorities from 1 being top priority to 6 being the least of a priority. The OG reading tutor, I think we've added that into the budget.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yes.
So these have not been added. I thought we added the OG reading tutor, but obviously.
We've added 2 additional ESPs
Yes.
based on students moving up.
And just lastly, in terms of the varsity assistant coaches, so one of the conversations we had is we do have an athletic fee. So we are collecting fees from families, and at this point in time, the conversation was we don't feel like we're at a point where we should be adding coaches while we're still collecting fees. So it's a conversation that we'll continue to have with Mike Masserino and Principal Brennan. But the total FTE is 3.46. The total projected cost is $261,540, which is about 1% of the overall budget. What is included in the budget is instructional materials and supports. So as you can see, making sure we have updated resources for our educators and our students. That total is a little over $140,000. And I would characterize this budget as a level services budget with some growth area targeted areas. So the budget, the revised preliminary is $26,884,172, which reflects a 4.50% increase over fiscal year '23. I'll also note that this budget does implement the complete reduction of student activity fees. So the committee a year ago, set a 2-year plan to remove student activity fees. So this is the final phase. So next year, FY24, there are no student activity fees that students will be charged. I think that is a great success story. And then lastly, again, part of the work that we need to do is think about the statutory distribution of the overall budget. So I'll just briefly share where we think we are today, but just again, highlighting that there's a lot of data that we don't have at this time. So first of all, Chapter 78, so we're using the fiscal year 23 number, the regional transportation aid, which is the fiscal year 23 number, and then revenues. So you sum those items, you get a total, you subtract that from the overall budget. In this case, we're projecting that the overall budget after offsets will be $22,818,971. And then we get the minimum local contribution from the state of Massachusetts. This is a number that is provided to us. This is the number that is most difficult to predict. We've gotten better, but it is a very, again, it's a very complicated formula, and if you can figure it out, then you probably should have a road show with superintendents across Massachusetts. But we're using the FY23 MLC numbers because that's the best data that we have. So in Northborough last year, the minimum local contribution was a little over $8 million. In Southborough, it was a little over $5 million. So we subtract that from the FY24 budget after offsets, and that is the amount that we have to apportion by the regional agreement, which is basically enrollment as of October 1. This is important because this really helps the towns understand what the regional budget impact will be on their overall budgets at the town level. So as you can see, Northborough portion is 61.22% of the student body, and Southborough's portion is 38.78%. We have the apportionment by regional agreement. We add the minimum local contribution, and that is the total amount that is apportioned to the community. So in Northborough, it's a little under 14 million, and in Southborough, it's a little over $8.8 million. As you can see from the FY23 assessments, the difference from FY23 for Northborough is 8.75%, and Southborough it's 8.49%. And you will notice there's parity between the two apportionments, so the percent increase is similar. In prior years, that's not been the case. Last year, for example, Northborough's contribution was 0, and Southborough's was, I think, about $600,000, and that is just how the equation works. What we are recommending is that the regional school committee consider applying excess and deficiency of $675,000. Basically, E&D can be used to mitigate the assessment impact, the tax impact to the taxpayer in each community. And Becky has done some work looking at our regional policy for E&D, and by applying $675,000, we still remain within the regional school committee policy of E&D. So $675,000 portioned. The total percent increase for each community for Northborough is 5.53%, and then Southborough is 5.29%. I will caution you that this is the best information that we have at this point in time, but the towns are looking for this level of information so that they can add this to their budget projections as they move forward, finalizing their budgets. And I will stop and answer any questions that people may have.
I'm going to have a granular question, and then people are going to have bigger ones. On one, student and staff devices seems like a very large increase, you know, like, and there's a discrepancy between one sheet, it says $84,006, and another one says 93,000. I'm just wondering.
So, so why the significant increase?
Well, wondering why the significant increase, and could that be tapered, or, I mean, in the larger sense of a $26 million budget, that's not gonna, but there are two different numbers in the presentation also.
So I'll look at that and make sure that,
It is the 84.
Okay.
Yes.
You see on the other one, it says
Yes.
90, okay.
so part of the work we, as a leadership team, still need to do, we also have ESSER funds that we need to apply.
Yep.
Part of the increase to overall technology line item is that we are purchasing devices, one-to-one devices for the incoming freshmen. Currently, we have a bring your own device
Right.
policy. This actually provides year one of us being able to phase in purchasing devices for students. What we're finding is that having students bring in devices, although it seems like a good idea, it has been very challenging, and it's hard to manage an overall network as a result. So
Equity,
this
it's
is
an
phase one.
it's an equity issue too. So that's a line item then that will be similar year to year going forward then.
So
Okay.
this is a commitment,
Yeah.
year one, that we'll need to continue to make.
Yeah,
Can I just
Okay.
clarify the two different numbers too? So the 84,000 is the increase over last year's budget,
got it.
but the total budget line item is 93,000.
Okay, thank you. Other questions?
Sorry, yeah. Can you go back to the $675,000? You said, I think you said the school committee has the right to approve. It's in the last page of your presentation.
Yeah, access.
What is it? Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, so excess and deficiency is at the end of a fiscal year, through good fiscal management, if there is money left over from what was appropriated. So let's say we have a 0.5% of.
That's
what
the
was-
remainder from last year?
No, so this is, our E&D balance currently is, I believe it's a little over $1.2
It's
million.
it's 1.1.
This is applying a portion of our E&D to reduce the assessment to each of the taxpayers in North and South.
And we're doing that because we think 8.75 and 8.49 is excessive?
Correct.
Yes.
The only
But
thing,
5.53 is not?
I think there's some work to do. And I think right now, with the data that we have, the 4.5% budget is based on just so many projections that it could come lower. The only way we can reduce the assessment to each of the communities is by reducing the overall aggregate budget. I will share that the 4.5% budget in aggregate is really the number that we need to focus in on. What the regional agreement and enrollment does is what it does. There's not a lot of control over that.
Sure.
The only control that the school committee has to try to impact that is through the E&D account. And the only thing we can do with E&D, we can't put it towards an athletic complex project or fund other parts. The only thing we can do is reduce the assessment to the community.
And E&D is only applicable to regional school districts, so the K through 8s do not have that same, I guess, fund available to them. It's only at the regional level.
Why do we have a balance at all, ever?
Well, I think, first of all, I think part of this is that it makes sure we have good fiscal management. That at the end of the year,
Sure.
once we've appropriated, our budgets, if we have a balance. And then secondly, I think that is the only place it can go into our
Sure.
E&D. The school committee worked to develop an E&D policy so that there is a reserve. I believe it's 3 and
3.25% to 3.75%.
So the school committee set a policy to always maintain that level of E and D. Applying 675,000 allows us to stay at the floor of that E and D policy.
And we're also we can only maintain a balance that does not exceed 5% of what our operating budget would be for the year. So we have to have this certified by the Department of Revenue each year, and so they're checking that level to make sure that we do not exceed that amount.
Well, that's very clear,
Yep.
so
Mhm.
there's no discussion on that. Thank you.
I think also, do we have a policy where we use part of that for OPEB? Didn't we do a part of that last year?
I think we talked about it, but I don't think we ever
We didn't, okay.
formalized that.
I think one of the strategies that we're trying to employ is that we can have a special education reserve account, and we can have a capital stabilization account. At the end of the fiscal year, right now, we only have the option to put it in E&D, where we're trying to move through the town of Southborough. It's been approved in Northborough, creating a capital stabilization fund so we can put some money in, so if we have capital projects on our capital plan, we actually can move forward with some of those projects.
Other questions?
I did
Karen?
have a question, and I'm just looking at this, so when I'm looking at the staff and student devices, and it's 93,000. Oh, so you moved to ESSER. I know that's what you were just talking about, but I just wanted to see it in the slide. So you took it out of the budget then? It's I'm not sure.
So that will be our next step, to look at some of the areas where we can free up and reduce this.
So it's not yet?
Not yet.
It's potential?
Yes, yeah.
Because my other question was then also about ESSER and like Title I funds, and could you use that for your own Martin Gillingham tutor? Probably, do you, I know it's optimal to have it in the budgets because you don't want to, lose that person, but I'm just wondering.
We did talk about that recently or at least Becky and I did, I think,
Yes.
about Title I. We've been talking about a few different options there. Right now, a lot of the Title I funding has been supporting tutoring in the area of mathematics. But there's a lot of interplay and discussion about the use of the various grants for different pieces, and we haven't got that. It's a puzzle that we haven't got all the pieces in place yet.
Yeah.
So we're still working through that.
Okay.
Kathleen?
Just a quick question. When Amy Collins came and spoke before about not having transportation fees, are those the ones that are being put back in to the budget?
Yeah, so we did have a conversation with Amy,
Mhm.
and those,
That amount reflects her request for the transportation costs.
Okay, thank you. And the out-of-district transportation for the sped folks, that's that an increase, an unexpected increase? Okay.
We've been, Marie and I have been on multiple phone calls actually with our special education transportation provider over the past few weeks, and we're really trying to get that number to a better place, I'd say, for next year. We've been doing a lot of internal work, and I think that we've actually come to an agreement with them, so I'm hoping to see that number come
Okay.
down a little bit.
All right, I know that's hard and sometimes just a hard stop, but just want to keep track of that. Thank you.
Chris?
Just a question related to that. Is that specifically the special ed out of district transportation? Is that because we have additional students being transported, or they are charging more for the service? Charging-
That was actually that reflects the addition of a new student.
Okay.
and
And
Again,
an increase, yes.
an increase in out-of-district special education transportation.
Yes, so the initial preliminary number reflects that initial increase, and then the revised was a new student being added.
right, while, so I'm going to shift gears and talk about the athletic complex. And since we are on the topic of finances, Becky's going to provide kind of an overview of where we are in terms of financing the overall athletic complex project. And Keith will provide an update of where we are in terms of moving this project forward.
Okay, so the warrant language that you see on the screen is actually language that's been provided to us by our bond counsel. As a regional school district and the school committee, you have the authority to actually authorize the district to borrow money for capital projects such as the athletic complex. What happens when the school committee takes a vote to authorize the borrowing of funds is that we then as a district need to send a letter to our member towns, Northborough and Southborough, alerting them to the fact that the school committee has authorized us to borrow money. They then have 60 days to either vote to approve or deny, or they can take no action. And if no action is taken by either committee, then the district actually can automatically move forward with the borrowing. We are working with both communities on the athletic project, and so with the timing of the town meetings, after a conversation with our bond counsel the other day, we will be having the school committee take this vote at the March meeting, which will then start the clock on the 60 days, and it will comply with both of the town meeting dates in Northborough and Southborough. Once the committee takes that vote, we do need to send a letter to both communities. The general law says 7 days, but our regional agreement does mean that we have to provide them that notice within 2 days of the school committee taking the vote. So we will have that ready to go if the vote is approved. The other difference with the regional school district borrowing is that usually when there is some sort of debt issuance in a community, it's 2/3 vote. With this, it's only a majority vote in both communities. So that is another nuance to this. So we are, working, I think, behind the scenes to also get that final number. We are hoping to have bids out, I'd say, by the middle of February with a return date of March 10th, which it would give us a firm number that the school committee would then be able to vote on and that we would be able to provide to the towns. So that is really some of the work that we're doing behind the scenes on the financing of the project.
So no vote. We talked about voting on this, but we're gonna move it off to March, so we have
Yes,
a timeline.
if we voted this evening.
Yeah.
The town meetings would not be, they'd have to hold special town meetings because it's outside of the
Because
60
of us.
days of the current ones that are scheduled.
Yep.
So I don't think it'd be wise for the committee to exercise that right at this point in time.
No. Any questions about that part or about the budget? Any comments?
I think I have I'm sorry.
Yeah,
if I
go ahead,
could.
no.
I have maybe a comment or a request. And it goes back to the excess and deficiency, and I think you kind of described it well, how there's guardrails around, the maximum it can be and then the minimum. And I don't know if this would be new, but I think I'd appreciate beyond the budget, which is more kind of income-based, the excess and deficiency, I guess, would be cash that the region has in its bank accounts to support the expenditures.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't mind trying to see if you can present to us what is the assets of the region basis, if we're gonna be pulling from that excess deficiency, that we can just see it, that we're comfortable we have that cash available to delay the increase in the budget to the towns, because I guess eventually, if the budget keeps going up, you would have to then ask for it, because we can't continue to draw on the E&D. So I just wouldn't mind seeing a balance sheet view and cash view of the region.
Sure.
And it doesn't need to be tonight. I mean, it can be like, it seems like
I'm writing myself a note so I don't forget.
Yes, we can
I
provide.
thought you were gonna pull
Yeah,
it up.
sorry.
I was like, you-
She almost did.
I know, I can, it's impressive. She was taking notes.
It is, like Greg was saying, the only mechanism we have to protect ourselves for a few things, and particularly to use towards assessment. And like, I know I've been a part of other discussions about just drawing that down to zero, but then there are challenges, if unexpected things come up, and then there's no ability to provide relief to the taxpayers either, at the end of the year. So it is complicated, and seeing that would be helpful for us to understand, or the public who may be watching, to understand too.
Yeah, we can also provide you a historical perspective of how much E&D we've applied to prior budgets to get a sense of, you know, what that's looked like. I think
Yeah.
when you get used to applying a revenue source to impact a budget, it's easy to become reliant upon that to get to percentages that might be more amenable in terms of what the town would like. But we can provide that data to you and information.
Right, because I suppose if I understood you correctly too, the circuit breaker, you were making a comment that you were pulling something forward that we typically haven't, so like,
Yeah,
to
so
get
we
to
would
where we
have-
are now, like.
Correct, so we are using our FY23 circuit breaker number, our FY23 chapter 70 number, regional transportation aid, because typically we'd have a sense of what those numbers would be at this point in time. And they fluctuate from year to year, so I think we are using a conservative number, using FY23. It's frustrating because we have budget timelines. We're asked to create and provide a budget to the committee for approval in time for the towns and town meetings when we don't necessarily have all the data that we need at the time to create a budget.
And these also go hand in hand with the K-8 budgets, so we're not operating alone. Yeah.
I think, and I'll end on this, and I think we need to really focus in on the overall aggregate percent increase of the budget. If the apportionment and the percent increase to the communities does what it does, there's really no control over that, from year to year.
The 4.5 is what you're talking about.
4.5, yeah, that,
Yeah,
correct.
yeah. Which is tough, I mean, it's a
Yeah.
tough number to set after many years of.
I mean, I think the last thing, I'll just end on next steps and before I turn it over to Keith. So, Principal Bevan and the leadership team, and directors will continue to have budget conversations around, what is the recommended budget we'd like to bring to the committee for a vote in February. We will be convening the operational budget subcommittee to continue discussions around a direction to provide us with good information to head in. And also, we will be providing the committee our annual budget booklets that contains the line item budget, a ton of information based on the 4.5% and what we know now. And that will be in the next week or so.
Thank you for the work.
Anything else?
Keith, just an update on kind of the moving the project forward in terms of the working group.
Yes. So Becky said it very well, and the end goal is to provide authentic bid materials that will go out to the public in mid-February with a closing date of early March, so that we can get a solid number for you to ultimately send to the towns for approval. But in order to get there, a lot of work is being done behind the scenes. Gale Associates has been our partner, our engineering partner to get there. They're working through the permitting process in the town of Northborough. They successfully received permitting from the Conservation Commission for their land disturbance permit. So that was successfully done last week. In addition to that, at the end of this month, they will be before the planning board for their site plan approval and the permitting related to that. So in order to get there, the planning board did have a number of questions, and Gale Associates has done some nice work in preparing answers, responses to those questions, and I feel confident that meeting will go well for us at the end of the month, which will then prepare us to go out for bid in mid-February. So in addition to all that work that's happening behind the scenes, the building committee that is chaired by Paul Desmond and David Roman met last Monday to assess some marketing materials to get the word out to the public. So in the next couple of weeks, there'll be a series of meetings with stakeholders, whether it's youth sports. We're going to meet with coaches tomorrow night to discuss the project, to discuss some of the details that's out there, and certainly garner any questions. And the key of all of that is to really get accurate information in the hands of the communities and the citizens, so they can feel as informed as possible about the project. It is an important project. It's a big one, and we want to make sure that accurate information is out there. So a lot of work has been done to create materials that are user-friendly. The website is active and updated, and now be part of the continued work. Kathleen?
I
Sure.
don't recall hearing before about a land disturbance
Yeah.
permit, and would like to know more about that, please.
Well, the good thing is that nothing's being disturbed because it's on the exact footprint that is currently being used. So no tree removal, nothing like that. It is a requirement of the site plan when we're doing this level of construction to go through that permitting as a preventative measure, but also to make sure we are doing the retaining properly and all the things that happen during construction. So it met satisfactorily with their request.
Thanks.
Yep, no problem. So like I mentioned, we are gonna be meeting with these groups, and that's gonna be part of just getting that information out in front of people. And I would like to mention, that we will be having a public forum, about the project. It has been launched. A lot of the principals, including Sean, has sent it out to the schools to inform that on February 6th from 7 to 8 in the auditorium here, Greg, myself, the engineering firm, Athletic Director Masserino will be on site, as well as I believe Paul and other members of the committee, to answer questions and to talk about different aspects of the project. And we will be continuing to send that out to the communities. So I think the other piece of it, I'd like to say, and it's kind of caught in the details, is that we did share a lot of this information with the principals, and they are doing some active work of getting the project information in front of PTOs, SOSs in Southborough, as well as school councils. So that's part of the work that's being done to get the information in front of people. So I think we're on target, we're on schedule. Gale Associates, like I mentioned, has been a great partner, and we will hopefully be ready for bid in a little less than a month. It's exciting.
What time's the public forum? 6 o'clock?
7 to 8
7.
on February 6th.
So, if, that's not a protected meeting, so therefore, if too many of us show up, then it's now a quorum, and is it actually a meeting? So none of us we should ensure that not too many people show up at that.
True.
Well, I mean, so I guess, so in
Good
light of
point.
that, would it be possible to have some sort of
Coordinated.
presentation ahead, so that perhaps we don't have to attend? I guess.
Yeah.
We should be thoughtful in that, because for those that are just joined, perhaps all of you are very well aware. I think it would be good if we could maybe have some sort of summary that would give us details, so that we, in fact, could help advocate on behalf, and help Sean and Paul and everyone.
I'm pretty
That's
sure
something
a
to think
meeting
about.
like that is covered under some sort of exception to open meeting.
Yeah, I
law.
think as long as we're not discussing
Yeah.
and deliberating,
Yeah.
but
I mean, I wouldn't sit together, things like that.
I think we should double check.
Sure.
You could always
I
post
just-
it.
I just had the conversation with town clerk.
Yep.
So I don't,
I think one
I
of the
think should we
things,
double check? That's
one of
all.
the things we
Yeah.
can do is we do have our marketing materials, which consists of 4 documents. So we can disseminate that information to all committee members, and then we'd be happy to sit down with any committee member who would like more information about the project in more detail, to make sure everyone has good information. So absolutely, we can do that.
Good question. Coalition for Equity update calendar.
Sure, so the Coalition for Equity did meet, so Rhoda Webb is leading that coalition. One of the outcomes of the last meeting was forming a Coalition for Equity calendaring advisory group. So we have a cadre of equity members as well as some community members and religious leaders who are reviewing the FY 23-24 student calendar, talking about specifically religious observances in the calendar, and potentially going to make some recommendations that I will then bring back to the committee. The first meeting, I think, went very well. I think there were a lot of great ideas on the table, a lot of great conversations and dialogue, and it was a good start. We do plan on meeting again January 26th, a week from tomorrow, to continue the conversations. And Ben also serves on that coalition and the working group of the coalition. Did I miss anything, Ben?
I don't think so. One question I had regarding the coalition that I think came up with some conversations with my peers today and with a couple of teachers. The equity audit that the district did, what's kind of happening with that and the recommendations that came from it?
So one of the things we did in terms of our action plan for the 22-23 school year is we included specific recommendations of the equity audit into our action plan. One of the things we talked a lot about is what we don't want to do is have 5 or 6 action plans around different topics. What we want to do is we want to have a strategic plan and then weave in those action items from the equity audit into our annual action plans that we develop. So if you look at our action plan, you'll see specific recommendations from the equity audit in there, and then we report out to the committee on progress toward the action plan that's moving forward this year.
Cool, thank you.
Well, do you anticipate bringing one recommended calendar or options for us? And I guess, would that be a question for the committee to ask?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now, I think I presented 3 options, 3 calendars to the committee. I think now, working with the working group, the coalition working group, we'll have a conversation around what do we want to bring to the committee for further conversation. I would share that it would be nice if the committee had more than one option.
I think that would be good. I would defer to others too, but, I mean, it's our request of the superintendent of what he brings, right, so.
Yes, I would agree. I would say that it would be great if the superintendent could bring forth, based on the recommendation of the working group, more than one calendar for us to work with.
Yeah, and so you and I will work together in preparing that calendar.
Okay.
Calendar.
What did I talk myself into? Okay.
You're on the committee.
Absolutely.
Congratulations.
Yes. Next is policy development. Again, none at this time. Back to public comment. Still none.
Can I maybe at this time suggest that we've not gotten a student report from Ben?
Oh, thank you.
And I neglected to mention that in my principal's report. I also want to welcome Ben back. He was not here for the December meeting, and I think it's important to note, it's the first time we're seeing him since the winter ball, which was a giant success and would literally not have happened without Ben's hard work, and so many times we heard at this committee donations he was receiving. So I do want to make note of that because it's the first time we've seen him in a bit.
And his acceptance to.
Yes.
And his acceptance to Dartmouth.
Yes, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So we're very proud of you, Ben, for lots of things, but
Thank
I don't know if now.
Yeah,
is
I
an
just wanted
opportunity.
to mention, so one of the conversations that Principal Bevan and I had is having student representative moving forward. And Ben's the first, so he's an inaugural principal's formal student report to the committee, and getting in the habit of having a more formal report from a student perspective. So this evening is the first of many, although it won't be Ben next year. I'm sure he'll set the tone this evening.
Thank you. So first, like Mr. Bevan said, with Winter Ball, thank you to all of you for approving the donations on behalf of the entire student body. It wouldn't have been possible without that. special thanks also to Ms. Pellegrino and Ms. Willard and the team in central office handling all of those financials. We've been meeting since September to do it all, and we ended up putting together a $40,000 dance. So we basically put on a wedding. And we couldn't have done it with them. With regards to like what's happening at the school right now, the biggest issue that I think students are facing right now is internet issues. Since the first day of school and continuing till today, like it's been very difficult to get a connection, to maintain a connection, to access educational materials, and it's causing like a pretty significant disruption to learning. Teachers are having to alter their plans last minute. Today during one of my classes, we had a teacher call the IT department to bring them a 35-foot Ethernet cable so they could connect to the internet because their computer wasn't connecting. And we had an Ethernet cable running from the wall to the teacher's desk so she could grade midterms. And that's kind of the biggest issue. Students aren't able to connect their devices, and it's now most of our teachers are moving offline for lessons. And I haven't used my computer in a class in weeks because teachers feel like it's causing too many difficulties and delays and having to waste time shifting lesson plans. So that's kind of what students are facing right now in terms of difficulties.
That's difficult. Any other events or anything that are being planned, or
I mean,
how's student spirit aside
overall, besides the internet, which is causing lots of frustration and conversations, it's a student spirit as well. Midterms are going on right now, so that's causing a understandable amount of, general bugness. But overall, I think people are doing okay. Teachers prepared us all very well for our midterms. Upcoming events, I know we have an open mic in a couple of weeks that Sachem is putting on and the Algonquin Writing Center is putting on. Our winter show is coming up. We're doing Putting for Patients, which is a fundraiser for the Jimmy Fund in the end of March, so that's kind of on the horizon, and we're starting to get students excited about that, along with all of our clubs and everything are active and healthy. So I think overall, student life is good.
Thank you. Any questions?
Just a question, and I'm sure not for Ben, but what is the probability or possibility of using more Ethernet cords, at least for the teachers?
Yeah, it's not
That
the
have been in
it's
place
not the
at one
long-term
time?
solution, and we're working on, I really don't wanna get into what's happening here, it's not
Yeah.
really the forum.
Okay.
But we do have a mitigation strategy to try to impact what students are experiencing.
Okay. And I'm thinking about the teachers, one Ethernet cord can make their life a lot easier and.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see. So, there was no public comment, personnel distribution report. Oh,
One
sorry.
other public comment, if I could.
Yep.
I just thought we should give a shout out to DECA, who had their, I guess, the regional tournament this year, and my son participated, and he said it was just dominated by Algonquin. I don't have specific numbers, but the judges were even saying things like, "Oh yeah, Algonquin again." So, great job with that. It's just a tremendous program. It seems to get bigger all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has grown a lot over just the last 4 years. Yeah, it's great. Personnel distribution report.
So in your packets, a distribution report as of January 18th, we had one retirement announcement, Linda Budenhagen, who is a speech and language assistant. So we'll have an opportunity to thank her for her service in the months ahead. And then one resignation, an ESP, special education aide, effective February 17th.
And a communication from Desi saying that we have met
So just
their
a compliance
requirements.
report in your packet, just for your information.
Approval of bills, other agenda items for next month. The budget recommendation will be presented for our vote at that time, right?
Correct.
Okay. Anything else the committee would like at that meeting?
What department will be presenting next time?
I think in February that, I don't think there is a department presenting next,
Okay.
in February because it's the recommended budget presentation. But Sean will triple check.
I think we all benefit so greatly from.
Yeah, it's the best part of the meeting.
So that moves us to executive session.
I do have one, can I have one comment related to executive session? Could we potentially, I know we're talking about, we're gonna enter executive session for collective bargaining. Is there any chance we could add, security to that as well?
It's not on the posted agenda.
For the next meeting?
We can definitely for the next. meeting.
Okay. Okay, security for the next meeting.
Very good. World languages will be presenting, but not until March. That's their next presentation.
So we need a motion to move to executive session without going back to open
I'll make a
session.
motion.
So Paul,
Move that we move to executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with Algonquin Regional Teachers Association, Unit A, due to the chair's determination that a discussion regarding this matter in an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the position of the committee with no intent to return to open meeting.
need a second?
Second.
Chris? Okay, so that moves us at 8:57. Roll call vote, oh, sorry, thank you. Chris?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Kathleen? Kathleen?
Yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
John? Yes. And Karen? Myself, yes, it moves. It's approved.